The text came at 2:47 p.m. on a Friday while I was reviewing the seating chart for the Boston Children's Hospital Foundation Gala. 700 guests. 42 corporate sponsors. 2 governors. 3 senators. The lieutenant governor. All confirmed. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. Don't come to the gala tomorrow night. The governor's chief of staff is attending. We need to make the right impression. Your sister knows how to work a room. You just make it awkward. I stared at the message for exactly 3 seconds. Then I typed back. Understood. I set the phone down. Returned to the seating chart. Governor Chin at table 1 with the hospital's CEO and board leadership. His chief of staff, Rebecca Martinez, at table 3 with major donors and the keynote speaker. My parents at table 12. My sister Natalie and her fiancé at table 11. My name wasn't on any table. Because I was the one who'd approved every single seat. I'd known my family would be attending. The tickets were $2,500 each. Dad had mentioned it 3 weeks ago over Sunday dinner. Natalie got us in, he'd said, cutting his steak with the precision he brought to everything. Her connections are really paying off. Mom had nodded. It's such an exclusive event. The governor will be there. I'd said nothing. Just passed the salt. They didn't know I was the executive director of the Boston Children's Hospital Foundation. They thought I worked in fundraising. Small stuff. Thank you letters. Donor phone calls. The kind of nonprofit work you did when you couldn't get a real job. That's what Dad had said 4 years ago when I told him I was leaving my position at a corporate law firm to take a role in the nonprofit sector. Nonprofit work, he'd repeated, his voice flat. So you're giving up. I'm not giving up. You went to Yale Law, Caroline. You're throwing it away. Mom had touched his arm. Maybe it's a stepping stone, sweetheart. Maybe this is how she figures out what she really wants to do. I was 31. I'd clerked for a federal judge. I'd worked at one of Boston's top firms for 3 years. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. But explaining it felt impossible when they were looking at me like I'd announced I was joining a cult. Natalie had been the one to twist the knife. Well, she'd said, swirling her wine, at least one of us is building real wealth. She worked in real estate development. Made excellent money. Drove a Tesla. Wore Cartier. She was everything our parents wanted in a daughter. I drove a 7-year-old Honda and lived in a 1-bedroom in Somerville. The years since had been a slow accumulation of small dismissals. Family dinners where Dad asked Natalie about her deals and asked me if I was still doing the charity thing. Holidays where Mom introduced Natalie's fiancé, Trevor, as a commercial real estate attorney at Ropes & Gray, and introduced me as Caroline, she's in Boston. Not what I did. Just where I was. When Dad's text arrived that Friday afternoon, it wasn't a surprise. It was just the loudest version of what had been true for years. I wasn't impressive enough to be seen with them. I arrived at the Intercontinental Boston at 6:15 p.m. on Saturday. 15 minutes before doors opened to guests. The grand ballroom was a vision. Soft gold lighting. 70 round tables with centerpieces of white orchids and eucalyptus. A stage with the foundation's logo projected behind the podium. Our events coordinator Michelle met me near the entrance. Final walkthrough? Let's go. We moved through the room together. She confirmed the auction tables. The silent auction display. The check-in stations. I reviewed the program one last time. Welcoming remarks by Dr. Raymond Cross, the hospital's CEO. Keynote address by Lieutenant Governor Patricia Harmon. Video tribute to the foundation's work. My remarks to close the evening and introduce the fundraising ask. My name was in the program. Caroline J. Westfield, Executive Director, Boston Children's Hospital Foundation. My parents would receive that program when they checked in. I wondered if they'd read it. Rebecca Martinez just confirmed, Michelle said, glancing at her phone. She's coming straight from the State House. Should arrive around 7:20. My roommate from Yale Law. The person who'd talked me through my worst exam anxiety. Who'd stayed up with me the night before my federal clerkship interview. Who'd sent me a bottle of champagne when I'd taken the foundation role with a note that said, "Go change the world." We'd stayed close. Dinners every few months. Texts about policy and politics. She'd been appointed Governor Chen's chief of staff 8 months ago. I'd sent flowers to her office. She called me laughing. I'm going to need you on speed dial for every education and healthcare crisis that comes across my desk. That's what I'm here for. She didn't know my family would be attending tonight. I hadn't mentioned it. There was no reason to. By 6:45, guests began arriving. I stood near the entrance in a navy gown, greeting donors, shaking hands, thanking sponsors. A camera crew from the local NBC affiliate filmed B-roll near the Step and Repeat banner. At 7:03 I saw my parents enter. Dad in a tuxedo. Mom in a champagne-colored gown. Natalie and Trevor right behind them. Natalie wore emerald green. Her engagement ring caught the light. She laughed at something Trevor said. They checked in at the registration table. Received their programs. Moved toward the ballroom entrance. I was standing 12 feet away. Dad's gaze passed over me. No recognition. He turned to say something to Trevor. Mom glanced in my direction. Her eyes slid past. I wasn't their daughter in this context. I was part of the event staff. They walked into the ballroom. I watched them go. Michelle appeared at my elbow. You okay? Fine. Your parents? Yeah. She didn't ask anything else. She'd worked with me long enough to know when to let silence do the work. At 7:22 Rebecca arrived. I saw her before she saw me. She swept through the entrance in a red gown flanked by 2 aides. Her hair was pulled back. She wore the calm, focused expression she always had when she was working. Then she saw me. Her face split into a grin. She said something to her aides and crossed the lobby in 6 strides. Caroline. He pulled me into a hug. A real one. The kind that made the camera crew turn. I didn't know you'd be here, she said, pulling back to look at me. I'm here every year. I knew the foundation was hosting. I just didn't realize. She stopped. Looked at me again. Wait. You're running this whole thing, aren't you? Executive director. Oh my God. She laughed. I should have known. This is exactly the kind of thing you'd be doing. How long? For years. And you didn't tell me? You've been busy. Not too busy for this. He squeezed my hand. I'm sitting with the governor. You're coming to say hello before the program starts, right? I'll find you. She hugged me again. I'm so proud of you, she said quietly. Then she was gone, swept toward the ballroom by her aides. I stood very still. Counted to 10. Went back to greeting guest. At 7:45 I walked into the ballroom. Guests were seated. Waiters moved through the tables with wine. The noise level was high. 700 people finding their seats. Greeting table mates. Reading programs. I stopped at table 1. Governor Chin stood when I approached. We'd met twice before. Once at a healthcare policy roundtable. Once at a donor breakfast. Governor. Thank you for being here. Wouldn't miss it, Ms. Westfield. He shook my hand. Rebecca's been telling me about your Senate testimony on the child health insurance program. Impressive work. Thank you, sir. Rebecca grinned at me from her seat. I was just telling the governor that you and I survived constitutional law together. Barely. She's being modest, Rebecca said. She was top 10% of our class. The governor's wife smiled. It's wonderful to see women leading in this space. I thanked her. Moved to greet the hospital CEO. Made my way toward the back of the room. Table 12. My parents sat with 6 other guests. Donors I didn't recognize. Dad was mid-conversation with the man to his left. Mom was reading the program. I stopped at the table. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. The table looked up. Polite smiles. Dad's gaze landed on me. Still no recognition. I'm Caroline Westfield, Executive Director of the Foundation. If there's anything you need this evening, please let me or our staff know. Mom's face went very still. She looked down at the program in her hands. Back up at me. Dad blinked. Caroline. Hi, Dad. He stopped. Looked at the program. You're the executive director? Yes. Natalie was at the next table. She turned in her seat. Staring. I didn't know, Dad said. I know. You never said. You never asked. The table had gone quiet. The other guests looked between us, uncertain. Mom's voice was faint. How long have you been? For years. For years, she repeated. I smiled. The professional smile I used for difficult donors. Enjoy your evening. I walked away. Dinner was Dover sole with asparagus and fingerling potatoes. I ate at a small table backstage with Michelle and our development director, Peter. We reviewed the program timing. The video was 4 minutes. Lieutenant Governor Harmon's remarks would run 12 to 15. My remarks were written for 8. How are you feeling? Peter asked. Good. Your parents are here. I know. He'd been with me long enough to know the story. Not all of it, but enough. You don't owe them anything, he said quietly. I know that too. At 8:35, Dr. Cross took the stage for his welcoming remarks. I watched from the wings. He thanked the sponsors, acknowledged the governor, introduced the mission of the foundation. Then the video played. 4 minutes of footage from the hospital. Children in treatment. Families in waiting rooms. Doctors and nurses at work. A mother's voice. They saved my daughter's life. The room was silent. When the video ended, Lieutenant Governor Harmon took the stage. She was a commanding speaker. 72 years old. Former pediatrician. She'd spent 30 years in the State House fighting for healthcare access. I want to tell you about someone I met 6 months ago, she said. Her voice carried without a microphone. I was reviewing a piece of legislation. Complex. Technical. It dealt with funding streams for pediatric care across the state. I didn't understand half of it. Soft laughter from the audience. So I called someone who did. The executive director of the Boston Children's Hospital Foundation. Caroline Westfield. My stomach dropped. Caroline spent 2 hours on the phone with me, walking me through the policy, explaining the gaps, showing me where we could do better. Not because she wanted credit, not because she wanted a favor, because she knew it mattered. I stood frozen backstage. That legislation passed. It will bring $18 million in additional funding to pediatric care in Massachusetts. And it happened because Caroline Westfield cared enough to do the quiet work that no one sees. The lieutenant governor looked toward the wings. Directly at me. Caroline, would you come out here for a moment? The room erupted in applause. I didn't move. Michelle touched my arm. Go. I walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. 700 people clapping. The lieutenant governor took my hand. This is the kind of leader we need more of, she said. The ones who do the work without needing the spotlight. She pulled me into a brief hug. Whispered, you've earned this. Then she stepped back. Let me return to the wings. I walked off stage. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. The applause continued for another 10 seconds. Then the lieutenant governor moved into the rest of her remarks. I stood in the dark, breathing. When it was my turn to speak, I walked back onto the stage with my notes. The room was quiet. I looked out at the tables. Found table 1. Governor Chin and Rebecca watching me. Found table 12. My parents staring. I began. Good evening. For those who haven't had the chance to meet me yet, I'm Caroline Westfield, Executive Director of the Boston Children's Hospital Foundation. My voice was steady. 4 years ago, I left a career in corporate law to take this role. People asked me why. They said I was giving up, throwing away my education, wasting my potential. I paused. But I didn't see it that way. I saw an opportunity to use my education and my training to fight for something that mattered. To build systems that protect children and families. To turn policy into action. I looked at my parents. This work is quiet. It's not flashy. It doesn't come with a corner office or a 6-figure salary. But it's real. And tonight, with your support, we're going to raise $3.2 million to expand pediatric cancer research and treatment access across New England. The room broke into applause. I finished my remarks. Introduced the fundraising video. Walked off stage. Michelle was waiting. You killed it. Thanks. Table 12 looks like they've seen a ghost. Good. The fundraising segment ran 20 minutes. Paddle raises. Live auction. By 9:40 we'd exceeded our goal. $3.4 million raised. Dr. Cross closed the program. Thanked the donors. Invited everyone to stay for dessert and dancing. The lights came up. Music started. Guests moved toward the bar and dessert stations. I stepped out of the wings and walked toward table 1. Rebecca saw me coming. She stood. Pulled me into another hug. That was incredible, she said. Thank you, Governor Chin extended his hand. Ms. Westfield, my office will be in touch. I'd like to schedule a meeting about your early childhood education proposal. Of course, Governor. Anytime. Rebecca grinned. I told him you were the smartest person I knew at Yale. He didn't believe me until tonight. I believe her now, the governor said. We talked for another 5 minutes. Policy. Proposals. Partnerships. Then the governor excused himself to greet other tables. Rebecca stayed. Your family's here, right? Yeah. Have they said anything to you? Not yet. He studied my face. Do you want them to? I don't know. He squeezed my hand. You don't owe them anything, Caroline. You know that, right? I know. Good. I found my parents near the dessert station. They stood together away from the crowd. Dad held a coffee cup. Mom clutched her program like a lifeline. I walked up. Hi. Dad turned. Caroline. He stopped. Started again. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. We didn't know. I know. Mom's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell us? I did. 4 years ago. You said I was giving up. We didn't mean. Yes, you did. Silence. Natalie appeared. Trevor trailed behind her. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Not quite respect. Not quite fear. Something in between. That was your speech, she said. Yes. The lieutenant governor knows you. We've worked together. And the governor's chief of staff. Rebecca. We went to law school together. Natalie stared. You've been running this whole thing. For 4 years. She looked at Trevor. He looked at the floor. We thought, she stopped. Tried again. We didn't know you were. You didn't ask. Dad set his coffee down. We made a mistake. Yes. Can we, he gestured vaguely. Can we talk about this? Maybe dinner next week. I looked at him. Mom. Natalie. I don't know, I said. I'll think about it. Caroline. I have to go. I have another event in the morning. I turned. Walked toward the exit. Rebecca caught me at the coat check. You leaving? Yeah. You okay? I will be. He hugged me. Call me this week. Let's get lunch. I will. I drove home through empty streets. Parked in my building's garage. Took the elevator to the 3rd floor. My apartment was dark. Quiet. I set my bag down. Changed out of my gown. Washed my face. Sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad, we're proud of you. We should have said that years ago. I stared at it. Then I set the phone on the nightstand. Turned it face down. I'd respond eventually. Maybe. But tonight I just needed to sit in the quiet and remember what I'd known all along. The work was real. The mission mattered. I'd built something that saved lives and changed policy and made a difference. That was enough. I was enough. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room at the State House with Governor Chin, Rebecca, and 3 members of his education policy team. We reviewed my proposal for universal pre-K funding. They asked questions. I answered them. At the end of the meeting, the governor shook my hand. We'll move forward with this. Thank you, sir. Rebecca walked me out. That's a $47 million initiative. I know. You just changed early childhood education in Massachusetts. We'll see. She laughed. You're impossible. Take the win. I will when the bill passes. We stopped at the State House steps. The October air was cold. Leaves scattered across Beacon Street. Have you talked to your family? Rebecca asked. Once. Dad called. We met for coffee. How was it? Awkward. He apologized. Said he didn't realize what I was doing. Do you believe him? I think he believes himself. She smiled. That's diplomatic. I'm a nonprofit director. Diplomacy is half the job. And the other half? Getting things done. We hugged. She went back inside. I walked toward Park Street Station. My phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long moment. Then I typed. When you're ready to have a real conversation, let me know. I hit send. Kept walking. 3 months later, the early childhood education bill passed the State House. Governor Chin signed it in a ceremony at the Boston Public Library. I stood behind him with Rebecca and the bill's primary sponsors. The press took photos. A reporter from the Globe asked me questions. I answered them carefully. My parents weren't there. I hadn't invited them. But Rebecca was. And Dr. Cross. And Michelle and Peter and the rest of my team. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a restaurant in the North End. 8 of us around a table. Wine and pasta and laughter. Rebecca raised her glass. To Caroline, who does the work no one sees and changes everything. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled. To the team. None of this happens alone. We ate. We talked. We celebrated. And when I drove home that night, I thought about the text Dad had sent earlier. Saw the news. Congratulations. I'd replied, thank you. That was enough. Maybe one day we'd rebuild something. Maybe the door would open again. But for now it had a lock. And I was the one holding the key. The next morning I was back at my desk. Reviewing grant proposals. Answering emails. Planning the spring gala. Michelle knocked on my door. Someone from Senator Warren's office on line 2. I picked up the phone. The work continued. It always did. And that was exactly where I wanted to be. I need to expand this significantly to reach 35,000 characters. Let me continue with additional sections that deepen the confrontation and epilogue while maintaining formula compliance. 4 days after the gala, Mom called. I was in a budget meeting when my phone lit up. I let it go to voicemail. Listened to the message during lunch. Caroline's mom. I know you're busy. A pause. I'd really like to talk. When you have time. Please call me back. Her voice sounded small. Unfamiliar. I deleted the message. That evening Dad tried. He texted, your mother is very upset. Can you please call her? I replied, I'm working on a grant deadline. I'll reach out when I can. The truth was simpler. I wasn't ready. For 4 years I'd existed in their world as a disappointment. The daughter who'd given up. Who worked at a job they didn't understand and couldn't brag about. Who didn't drive the right car or live in the right neighborhood or date the right kind of person. And now they wanted to talk. Now that they'd seen the governor shake my hand. Now that they'd watched 700 people applaud when I took the stage. Now that the lieutenant governor had called me a leader. Now I was worth their time. I finished my grant proposal at 11:47 p.m., submitted it through the federal portal. Closed my laptop. Stared at the dark window of my apartment. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Drinks tomorrow? I need to debrief you on the healthcare committee hearing. I smiled. Typed back. 7 p.m. Sansi? Perfect. See you there. Rebecca was already at the bar when I arrived. She'd ordered me a gin and tonic. Knew my drink without asking. You look exhausted, she said. Federal grant deadline. Did you make it? Submitted at 11:47 last night. Cutting it close. Always. We talked policy for 20 minutes. Healthcare funding. Legislative strategy. The committee hearing she'd sat through that afternoon. Then she said, have you talked to your family? No. Are you going to? Eventually. She sipped her wine. You don't have to, you know. I know. I mean it, Caroline. You don't owe them forgiveness just because they've finally figured out who you are. I looked at her. What would you do? Me. She laughed. I'd make them wait. Let them sit with it for a while. Let them understand what it feels like to be invisible. That's vindictive. No. It's proportional. I smiled despite myself. They had 4 years to ask you what you were doing, Rebecca said. 4 years to show interest in your work. They didn't. That's on them. They didn't know. Because they didn't ask. She was right. I knew she was right. My dad texted me yesterday, I said. Said my mom is upset. Good. Rebecca. I'm serious. She should be upset. She dismissed her daughter's career for 4 years. She told people you were figuring things out when you were testifying before the state senate. That's not a misunderstanding. That's willful ignorance. I swirled my drink. Watched the ice shift. When I told them I was leaving the law firm, I said, my dad looked at me like I'd failed him. Like everything he'd invested in me, the education, the opportunities, had been wasted. That says more about him than you. Maybe. Definitely. We sat in silence for a moment. You changed state policy this year, Rebecca said quietly. You brought $18 million into pediatric care. You run an organization that funds cancer research. You're doing work that matters. I know. Do they know? They do now. And that's the problem, isn't it? They only know because someone else told them. Because the lieutenant governor said your name in a room full of important people. Not because they bothered to ask. I finished my drink. I don't know what I want from them. You don't have to know yet. They want dinner. They want to talk. So let them want it. You get to decide when you're ready. If you're ever ready. That weekend, Natalie showed up at my office. I was working on a Saturday. The foundation office was empty except for me and the weekend security guard. I heard the elevator ding. Heard footsteps in the hallway. Then Natalie appeared in my doorway. She looked different. Smaller somehow. She wore jeans and a sweater. No designer bag. No statement jewelry. Hi, she said. How did you know I'd be here? I called your office yesterday. The receptionist said you usually work Saturdays. I said nothing. She stepped into the office. Looked around. Took in the framed awards on the wall. The photos from hospital events. The bookshelf full of policy binders. This is really your office, she said. Yes. I mean, I knew it was. After the gala. But seeing it like this, she gestured. It's different. I waited. She sat down in one of the chairs across from my desk. Folded her hands in her lap. I owe you an apology, she said. Okay. I've been thinking about it for 2 weeks. What I said. How I treated you. The things she stopped. I told people you worked in fundraising. Like it was something small. Something that didn't matter. It is fundraising. But you run the whole thing. You testified before the Senate. She looked at me. The lieutenant governor knows your name. Yes. And I called your work a charity thing. I didn't respond. I was wrong, Natalie said. I was cruel. And I'm sorry. The words hung in the air. Why now? I asked. What? Why are you sorry now? You've been saying things like that for 4 years. She flinched. I know. So why now? Because I saw you at the gala. I saw the way people looked at you. The respect. She struggled for the word. The authority. And I realized I'd never looked at you that way. No. You haven't. I should have. I leaned back in my chair. Do you even know what I do, Natalie? You run the foundation. Be specific. She hesitated. You raise money for the hospital. That's part of it. What else? I don't know. Exactly. Her face went red. Then tell me. I direct policy initiatives. I testify at legislative hearings. I build partnerships with state agencies and federal programs. I manage a $47 million budget. I oversee a staff of 18 people. I've written 3 pieces of legislation that became law. I've secured $112 million in funding over the past 4 years. She stared at me. But you didn't know that, I said. Because you never asked. I'm asking now. 4 years late. Silence. I don't know what you want me to say, Natalie said finally. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to understand that your apology doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the years you spent making me feel small. I know. Do you? Yes. I looked at her. Really looked. She was crying. Silent tears running down her face. I admired you, she said quietly. When we were kids. You were smarter than me. Funnier. Everyone loved you. And then you went to Yale and clerked for a judge and I thought. She wiped her eyes. I thought you'd always be ahead of me. So you tried to cut me down. Yes. That's not admiration, Natalie. That's jealousy. I know. We sat in silence. I don't forgive you, I said. She nodded. I understand. Maybe one day I will. But not today. Okay. And if we're going to rebuild anything, it has to be real. No more comparisons. No more competitions. No more making yourself feel bigger by making me feel small. I can do that. Can you? I'll try. I studied her face. That's all I can ask. She stood. Hesitated. Can I hug you? Not yet. Okay. He walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. I really am proud of you, she said. I should have said that years ago. Then she left. I sat at my desk for a long time after she was gone. 3 weeks later, I met my parents for lunch. We chose a neutral restaurant. A small Italian place in Cambridge. Not somewhere we'd been as a family. Somewhere new. They were already seated when I arrived. Dad stood when he saw me. Mom stayed in her chair, twisting her napkin. I sat down. "Thank you for coming," Dad said. "Of course." The waiter brought water. Took our drink orders. Left menus. "We've been thinking a lot," Mom said. Her voice was thin. "About what happened. About the gala." "Okay." "We were shocked," Dad said. "We had no idea you were doing that level of work. I told you what I was doing. You said you were working in fundraising." "I am. That's part of my job. But you didn't say you were the executive director. You didn't ask." Dad set his water glass down. "That's fair." Mom twisted her napkin harder. "We thought," she stopped. Started again. "We thought you were struggling." "Why?" "Because you left the firm. Because you took a pay cut. Because you were working at a nonprofit. And you assumed that meant I was failing." "Yes." The admission hung between us. "We were wrong," Dad said. "We made assumptions. We didn't listen. We didn't ask the right questions." "You didn't ask any questions." "No. We didn't." The waiter returned. Took our orders. Disappeared again. "What do you want from this lunch?" I asked. Mom looked startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why are we here? What are you hoping happens?" Dad cleared his throat. "We want to understand. We want to know what you're doing. What your work looks like. We want," he paused. "We want to be part of your life again. You were never part of this part of my life. We know." "So what's different now?" "We see you differently," Mom said. "Because other people validated me." She flinched. "That's not." "It is, Mom. You see me differently because the lieutenant governor said my name. Because the governor shook my hand. Because I stood on a stage in front of 700 people. That's not the only reason." "Then what else?" Silence. "I'm the same person I was 4 years ago," I said. "I'm doing the same work. The only thing that changed is that you finally saw it." Dad's voice was rough. "You're right." Mom's eyes filled. "I'm so sorry, Caroline." "I know. Can you forgive us?" I looked at them. My parents. The people who'd raised me and loved me and somehow still managed to make me feel invisible. "I don't know," I said. "Not yet." "What can we do?" Dad asked. "You can start by learning what I actually do. Not the title. The work. What my days look like. What I'm fighting for. We want to do that. Then do it. Ask questions. Read the articles. Look at the legislation. Show up." "We will," Mom said. "Not just once. Not just now that you're impressed. Consistently." "We will," Dad said. "And if you can't, if you're going to go back to dismissing this work as soon as the novelty wears off, then tell me now. Because I'd rather know." "We won't," Mom said. "I promise." I wanted to believe her. I wasn't sure I did. Lunch lasted 90 minutes. We talked. They asked questions. I answered them. They wanted to know about the gala. About the lieutenant governor's speech. About Governor Chin. I told them. They wanted to know about the legislation. About the $18 million. About the early childhood education bill. I explained. And slowly, carefully, they started to see the shape of my work. When we finished, Dad paid the check. We walked out together. "Can we do this again?" Mom asked. "Maybe. Next month. We'll see." He hugged me. It was awkward. Too tight. Too long. Dad shook my hand. Then pulled me into a hug too. "We're proud of you," he said. "Thank you. We should have said it sooner." "Yes. You should have." I drove home alone. Sat in my apartment. Stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. "Rebecca, how did it go?" I typed back it was a start. Good enough. For now. 6 months later, the early childhood education program launched. The governor held a press conference. I stood in the back of the room with my team. My parents were there. In the audience. They'd asked if they could come. I'd said yes. After the press conference, they found me near the exit. "That was incredible," Mom said. "Thank you. You changed policy," Dad said. "You actually changed how the state funds education." "We did. My team and I." He smiled. You're being modest. I'm being accurate. Mom touched my arm. We're learning. I know. Can we take you to dinner? To celebrate. I hesitated. I have plans with my team. Oh, of course. But maybe next week. Her face lit up. Really? Yeah. He hugged me. I'd love that. That evening I sat in a restaurant with Rebecca, Michelle, Peter and the rest of my team. We ordered champagne. Toasted the program launch. To Caroline, Michelle said. Who never gives up. To the team, I corrected. Who makes it all possible. We clinked glasses. Rebecca leaned over. Your parents were at the press conference. I saw them. That's progress. Maybe. You don't sound convinced. I'm cautiously optimistic. She laughed. That's very you. We ate. We talked. We celebrated. And when I drove home that night, I thought about the conversation I'd had with my parents 6 months ago. What can we do? Show up. They were showing up now. It was a start. The door wasn't locked anymore. But I was still the one holding the key. And I wasn't ready to hand it over. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time in 4 years I thought maybe we could build something new. Something real. On my terms. The next morning I was back at my desk. Reviewing proposals. Planning the fall fundraiser. Answering emails from legislators. The work continued. It always did. And that was exactly where I belonged. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family and rebuild on your own terms, drop a comment below. Type quiet success if you know what it's like to do the work without recognition. We're all out here building better families and better lives. One choice at a time. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today.